Hey everyone, you're watching KTAL News Now. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin, and today is Friday. We made it to the end of the week, and the weekend is pretty much here. But today is normally Feel Good Friday, but I thought I'd switch it up a little bit ahead of football season and turn it into a Fantasy Football Friday because we are a little less than a month away from the NFL season kicking off officially on Thursday, September 4th. And with that is the wrapping up of the offseason and people getting into their fantasy football drafts. And the preseason is going on right now. They had a few games last night, and there will be a little bit more over the weekend. But not a lot of people pay attention in the preseason because it's not like the starters that they are going to be drafting, aside from some of the rookies who are getting a lot of playing time early on. And that is something to keep in mind if you're really high on a rookie this season and you want to see how they're exactly being used in the offense. It's definitely something to at least pay attention to and keep up with, not necessarily all the practices and their role in the practices, but just like how they're playing throughout, the entire preseason, and if they'll have a spot come, the regular season. But today we will be covering the top 10 quarterbacks in fantasy football. And the quarterback position in fantasy football is, in my opinion, it's not really that valuable. And whereas compared to real life, quarterback is definitely among the most important positions on the field. If you don't have a quarterback, your offense really can't move the ball, and it's not really going to go well for you. But where in fantasy, if you're playing in a standard league, if there's normally a defense and a kicker, I argue that quarterbacks are, aside from defense and kicker, quarterbacks are probably the least important position when it comes to fantasy, which is, again, is a stark contrast to their importance in real life football, because you'll have the top three elite guys when it comes to quarterbacks. But everyone outside of that, they'll usually finish within a couple spots of each other, or maybe 20 to 30 points over the course of a season. So it's really not that much of a difference maker spread out over, 16, 17 games. I mean, you're talking about the difference of 2 to 3 points per week. So again, it's not really something that you have to worry about throughout the season, or you have to get somebody early to make sure you have a great team. Because the truly great teams build that foundation of receivers and running backs first before you settle on a quarterback, which is something that I always, try to stress, because you can get somebody super late and then they end up being a absolute star for you the rest of the season. And two of those guys on my list today are people that I ended up drafting in like the 12th round, and they ended up finishing in the top 5. So it's just something to keep in mind in terms of the value that the quarterback position has in fantasy. And it's not to say that these guys aren't great players, but it's outside of the elite guys, you don't have to spend so much draft capital on somebody that to truly get an elite guy that will make a difference for you. So my first on the list is Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills, who is pretty much Mr. Consistent when it comes to fantasy finishes, and he's finished as the first overall quarterback in 3 of the last 5 seasons, and in the 2 that he wasn't the first overall quarterback, he was second overall. So he's definitely, like I said, Mr. Consistent in terms of being that elite absolute show-stopping fantasy option. And last year he ended up putting up 3,700 passing yards, 28 passing touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, which is okay. It's pretty decent for his standards. But where he really shined is on the ground. He's had almost over 500 rushing yards in all but one of his seasons in his career. And then on the ground, he also found the end zone a ton, especially in the last 2 seasons. Because in the last 2 seasons, he put up 12 touchdowns and 15 touchdowns. So that's 27 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 seasons, which is just mind-boggling for a quarterback. The only person who rivals that in terms of getting into the end zone as a quarterback is Jaylen Herz, who we'll also talk about later on. But unfortunately, Josh Allen's average draft position, or ADP, is the late second round currently, which is just way too high in my opinion. I mean, I know you know what you're getting. You know you're getting the best of the best or among the best. He's at worst going to finish maybe fifth overall as a quarterback. So you know what you're getting. You know exactly what his value is. But unfortunately, you have to give up that equally, if not more valuable, second-round pick on a quarterback where you could be filling out your team with receivers and running backs. So it's just not something I would recommend doing unless you were in a league like mine, for example, where everybody's super competitive. They do a lot of research, and they know that the quarterback position is not as valuable. So I'm willing to guess that in that league, Josh Allen won't be taken until maybe like the late third, early fourth round. And that's somewhere I would definitely consider taking him. If he falls there, I would not consider taking him in the second round at all. It doesn't matter what part of the second round you're in. It's just not worth it to me in terms of spending up that much to get Josh Allen. But again, he is an elite quarterback. He's going to put up those numbers. So, I mean, I'm not going to fault you for taking him if you want just the truly best of the best. But there's also some people who are going a little bit later, including Lamar Jackson, who finished as the first overall quarterback last year. And he did that for the first time since 2019. And he ended up putting up 4,000 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions, which is insane in terms of the efficiency he was doing as a passer, especially considering the fact that the Baltimore Ravens were second to last in terms of passing attempts, but ended up finishing 8th in the league in passing yards, which, again, that just goes to show you just how insanely efficient and precise he was when throwing the football. And he's taken so many steps as a passer. I know people have been writing him off for years, his whole career, as he's just a running back, but he has proved a lot of people wrong as a passer, just showing how well he has been doing at throwing the football. And unfortunately, he's in the same kind of boat as Josh Allen, where he's going at the late second, early third round, the 2-3 turn, and it's just not somewhere I would be willing to spend a pick on a quarterback without filling out my team first, because again, those positions you need more of them, like receivers and running backs. So it's crucial that you get your team filled out before you look at, okay, let me get a tight end or a quarterback. So it's way too high of a price to pay for him, in my opinion, which is unfortunate because I'm a huge Lamar fan and Josh Allen fan, and I know what they can do for fantasy. But you can get somebody, like I was saying earlier, in the 12th round who could potentially win your league. And that player is Jaden Daniels, who is my 3rd overall quarterback. He had arguably one of the best rookie seasons, if not the best rookie season for a quarterback in NFL history last year. And he ended up winning the Rookie of the Year. He took his team all the way to the NFC Championship game as a rookie. And in terms of fantasy, he finishes the 5th overall quarterback. And like I said, I got him in the 12th round. It's pretty much nothing to spend on a person to take a chance on and see if they pan out. And he ended up paying dividends with that 12th round pick, which again is, you're at the end of the draft, you're just throwing darts on who can make a difference for your team. And last year he put up 3,500 passing yards and 25 passing touchdowns with 9 interceptions, but he did so while having the highest completion percentage in NFL history as a rookie, where he completed nearly 70% of his passes, which is insane. And it goes back to Lamar with the efficiency of a passer like that. And if he can take that next step as a passer, who knows what he's capable of. I think he is definitely capable of finishing as the number 1 overall quarterback this year, because he also got it done on the ground like Lamar. He ran for almost 900 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. His 891 rushing yards were the most ever for a rookie quarterback. So again, if he can just build upon that, and we might even see a 1,000-yard season from him one day, he would absolutely be the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy if that were the case. So that's somebody to keep an eye on. But unfortunately, he is now, because of that success, he is now going in the mid-third round, which, again, like I said earlier, y'all, I got him in the 12th last year. So it just goes to show you just what value is lying out there later on. But another quarterback on my list who is also a former LSU quarterback and former Heisman winner like Jaden Daniels is Joe Burrow. And he finished as the quarterback 3 last year, and he threw for almost 5,000 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And he also had a little bit on the ground where he ran for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. And if he's healthy, you can count on him to have at least 4,500 yards. That's what he's done every season that he's played a full season. And if you can if there's a pipe dream scenario where you have the first overall pick and you can take Ja'Marr Chase at the first overall pick, he's pretty much the consensus top overall pick in fantasy this year. But if you have the first pick, your next 2 picks will be the second and third round, but then your following pick won't be until the end of the 4th round. And unfortunately, Joe Burrow is going in the early 4th round right now. So if there's a world out there where you can get him at the end of the 4th round after taking Ja'Marr Chase, I think that is the best possible scenario to start a fantasy draft with. But unfortunately, if you live in Louisiana and you're playing, if you're an LSU fan or you're playing with a bunch of LSU fans who want to take guys like Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow super early, like earlier than they're already going, then it'll probably be next to impossible to do so, unfortunately. But in any other scenario, you would be golden if somebody opts to go receiver or running back before taking Joe Burrow, and he ends up falling to the end of the 4th round, which, again, is near impossible being in Louisiana. So you never know, though. But our next pick is Jaylen Herz. He is my 5th-ranked quarterback. And he has finished in the top 3 twice in his career. He has finished as the 2nd overall quarterback and the 3rd overall quarterback before. And last year he finished as the quarterback 8 overall. And he did this despite being on the Eagles, who passed for the least amount in the NFL last season. He only threw the ball 361 times last season compared to 538 times the previous season. And his passing stats were not really that great in terms of numbers if you're looking on a stat sheet. I mean, he only threw for 2,900 passing yards and 18 touchdowns with 5 interceptions. But again, like the other top guys, he got it done on the ground with the tush push or the brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it, where he would just score a ton of rushing touchdowns. He racked up 14 rushing touchdowns to combine with 630 rushing yards. So he was phenomenal on the ground, and that's where all of his points came from. Now, do I think that he will get 14 rushing touchdowns again this year? Absolutely not. But because they have someone like Saquon Barkley, their running back, who they can rely on in the running game, and that's, again, why his passing numbers were down so much, is because they just absolutely went all in on the run all the way to the Super Bowl. So I'm not saying it's a bad strategy in terms of real life, because it obviously works in real life, but for fantasy purposes, it does hurt fantasy managers who want to take a chance on a quarterback who can get them a lot of points. And I'm not saying Jaylen Herz is not going to do that again this year. Double-digit touchdowns are definitely still in the cards for this year because of the tush push or brotherly shove, and despite the NFL's efforts or some teams in the NFL trying to get it banned, which, that's a story for another day as well. I can go on about that. But if they stay committed to the run, I think he'll put up. I think he'll still easily be a top 10 quarterback. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. But the real question is if he can return to that form of the 2nd overall, 3rd overall quarterback. And this is another guy that I ended up in 2021, where he finished as a quarterback in the top 10 of quarterbacks, where I also got him in the 12th round. And this is what I keep saying, where you can get these guys that are studs later on that can carry you to a fantasy championship or even the playoffs. And his ADP or average draft position is in the early 4th round, which again is for someone like Jaylen Herz, where he finished only as a quarterback 8 last year. That's way too high in my opinion, even though he has this potential to be a top 5 guy. And if you have a mid-round, second round, if you have a mid-second round pick and you find yourself taking A.J. Brown, that would be the only way I would take Hertz in the 4th, is if you can have that stack. And because every time a quarterback throws to your receiver who are on the same team, like say he throws a touchdown to that receiver, you not only get 6 points for the passing touchdown, but you also get 6 points for the receiver catching that touchdown, and then an extra point if you are in a PPR league, which is points per reception. So it's pretty awesome to have that stack when it's available. It's not always going to be there, and you might have to reach for it. So I don't recommend doing that exactly if you don't have these uber talented guys who can do something like this. That would be the only way I would recommend that. But my next quarterback, which is the 6th overall in my rankings, is Baker Mayfield for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had a career year last year, finishing as the quarterback 4 overall. He threw for over 4,500 passing yards and 41 touchdowns, which might be a little bit of an outlier. That's something to keep in mind, considering previously in his career he has never eclipsed 30-plus passing touchdowns, and he ended up throwing 41 last year. And not to say that they won't see the same passing volume last year, but it's something that will probably regress in terms of numbers. And I still think he will pass for a lot of yards this year, but maybe not the same amount of touchdowns, because guys like Mike Evans are getting older, or they're up there in age. And Mike Evans has finished with 1,000 receiving yards every single year of his career, and he barely got there last year, even with the extra game where the NFL added an extra week. So I don't think he can replicate this, but I think he can still be a super reliable guy. I'm not saying he can be a top 3 guy like the others, but I think if you are looking for just a reliable passer that can get you 20 plus points a week, sometimes even 25 if he has like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, which will happen, I would definitely not shy away from taking him. And then, like I said earlier, he was undrafted last year, and this ended up winning people some leagues because he finished inside the top 5. And this is just the absolute steals you can get later on without using your second, third round picks to get someone that's elite, when you can get someone like Baker, who was, again, undrafted last year, and be in the top 4. So that's insanely valuable when it comes to just strategizing and knowing when to take a quarterback, because if you pass on these skill guys who will carry your team every week, it will not bode well for you moving forward. And in terms of the 7th overall quarterback in my rankings, who might be the best quarterback in the league in real life, but not so much for fantasy, is Patrick Mahomes. And they have been to the Super Bowl a billion times in the last 5 years or so. Not to say that, again, they're not one of the best teams in the league, that he's not the best quarterback in the league, but in terms of fantasy, he has been really lacking in terms of production. I mean, last year he finished outside the top 10 of quarterbacks, and he has not been in the top 6 since 2022. And the efficiency numbers have just been decreasing every single year in the last 5 or so years. I mean, last year he failed to put up 4,000 yards. He finished with a little bit over 3,900 yards and 26 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, which for his standards, knowing what he can be, is just not the best. I mean, he had a little over 300 rushing yards on the ground, so he can definitely run a little bit, but not as much as some of the top guys. And he's still going in the late 4th round. So it's really not someone I'm looking to draft probably at all. I mean, I'm not saying he's not going to be a top 10 guy, because obviously he's in the top 10. But knowing what his ceiling can be, and just having the talent around him still puts him in the conversation. But again, he will still be kind of this low-end safe option despite the fact that he's going in the 4th round. So at that cost, I am just not buying Patrick Mahomes this year. Unless if he falls to like the 5th or 6th round, then maybe I'd consider it. But again, that's just way too high of a price to pay for a guy like that who had a, down year for his standards. But someone who also broke out on the scene as a rookie last year was Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos. He finished as the quarterback 11, despite being absolutely abysmal in the first 5 weeks. He just could not get it going. But then in week 5, everything just clicked for him. And he just hit the ground running and just never looked back. And he was, he finished as the quarterback 7 last year. So he was inside the top 10. And he went on his way to throw for almost 3,800 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 12 picks, which is pretty similar to Patrick Mahomes' numbers last year, despite being a rookie, just to see the talent that is there and the foundation that he could use as a rookie to propel himself to take that next step this year, especially with receiver Courtland Sutton just signing a massive extension. So their receivers and weapons are there to stay. He can definitely take that next step. He showed flashes of just being able to run as well. He ran for over 400 yards last year and 4 touchdowns. So he can definitely get it done on the ground. He can pretty much explode at any play, and just whether it's through the air or on the ground, he's definitely a threat on both sides. And despite, having all this talent, he's not going to be this top 3 guy where he'll have weeks or spike weeks that they're called, where he just goes off for 30-plus points like Josh Allen or Lamar. But he's just going to be very consistent in terms of putting up points on a week-to-week basis. I mean, his ADP right now is in the early 7th round, which is I'm totally fine with that. I'm not, I would probably see if he drops a little bit depending on how quarterback heavy your league mates are drafting. But the 7th I think is totally fine where he's going, especially considering, like I said, he's going to give you that consistency. And by the 7th round, you already have most of your team built out already. So you won't have to worry about sacrificing your pick or passing on a team need to get a quarterback, because, like I said, at that point, you already have probably 3 receivers or 4 receivers and 2 running backs, maybe a tight end. So you'll have most of your team built out, which is super important in terms of building that foundation to take a swing on Bo Nix, who, like I said, is going to get you consistent points each week and just be a reliable option that you won't have to worry about replacing or starting each week. So it's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. But one person who is a little bit of a swing this year, who had a very bumpy season last year, it was Kyler Murray. He finished as the quarterback 10 somehow, despite being this very up and down journey. If you owned him last year and if you had him on your team, you'll know that it was not a fun ride. It was very frustrating trying to start him each week, considering, he put up over 3,800 passing yards and 21 touchdowns, and he also ran on the ground for almost 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he also had weeks where he would finish under 20 points, and then one week he only had 4-point-something points, and he finished under 20 points 5 times last season. So that's why I was saying it was very frustrating if you were a fantasy manager who was rostering Kyler Murray last season as your quarterback. I know my dad had him last year in his league, and he would call me every week complaining oh my God, he put up 11 points and, it lost me the week. So it's just somebody to it's a little bit of a because he's been that guy before. Back in 2020, he finished as the 3rd overall quarterback. So we know what he's capable of. It's just a matter of if he can get there and be the same person that he was. But it looks like from early training camp reports that Marvin Harrison Jr., his lead receiver last year, who was also a rookie, that he's looking like the best player in camp. He's ready to take that next step and have a breakout season as well. So if that's somebody that he can rely on this season to get him those points, then it will be a nice season for him. He's definitely capable of finishing in the top 10, but the real question is if he can return to that top 5 form, which he has always been a consistent runner. He'll always be a safe floor option, and if you want to play it safe, that he's also a person who will get it done on the ground and put up rushing yards each week. Despite having some of those dud weeks, just be careful of that. He's not if you find him not producing the way you want to. I mean, he's only going in he's going around like that 8th, 9th round, right around there. So at that point, you aren't married to him as a draft pick. So if he's not producing the way you want to, just pick up somebody else or look for a trade and just try to find somebody else to fill that slot, because at the end of the day, like I said, if you're spending a 9th round pick on a quarterback, or even later, if you're getting him in like the 10th or 11th maybe, then at that point you're just throwing darts and just trying to see what exactly sticks and just what you can land in terms of talent to carry you through the season. And my last pick of the day is Brock Purdy for the San Francisco 49ers, who is also a safer option in terms of putting up points each week. I mean, last year he fell outside of the top 12, but they also didn't really pass a whole lot last year, because in the previous year he finished inside the top 6. He was the quarterback 6 overall the previous season. And last season, he put up 3,800 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 12 picks, which, again, is just, it's okay, I guess. But he also can get it done a little bit on the ground. He also ran for over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. And despite, being the quarterback 14 last year, he was 3rd among quarterbacks in yards per attempt. And if you don't know what yards per attempt is, it's usually measured it factors in not just completions, but also passing attempts that fall incomplete, to measure just how well a quarterback is at just moving the ball down the field. And finishing 3rd in yards per attempt, it just shows that he's not afraid to throw it deep and just make a huge play. I mean, they are definitely capable of making those huge plays with the talent around them in San Francisco. I know that Deebo Samuel has recently moved on to the Washington Commanders, but they still have Christian McCaffrey. If he stays healthy, he's definitely the best fantasy player in football. He's shown that throughout his career. They also have Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver, and as well as tight end George Kittle. So Purdy definitely has the talent around him to continue to put up numbers. And his ADP is around the round 9 to round 10 turn, like late 9th, early 10th. So at that point, you're playing it safe. You don't have to stay committed to this draft pick. You didn't spend that much on him to get him. So if they're not doing well, which I don't think they will, I think they'll still be one of the best offenses in football, as they have been for the last 5 years. And I mean, you can get him behind quarterbacks like Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, who Jared Goff is another safe, consistent guy, but we already know what he can do. Whereas Brock Purdy is, like I said, the previous season, aside 2 years ago, he finished inside the top 6. I don't think Jared Goff is capable of that. So, and he's, going a whole round and a round or two ahead of Purdy. So this is what I was saying earlier, where just keep in mind that you can get consistent weak producers at the end of the drafts almost for basically nothing. It doesn't cost you a thing to get guys like this and just have that safe, reliable option to start every week. But that's all of my rankings today. I appreciate anyone who was here through everything, and if you made it to the end, I thank you again. And this has been an edition of Fantasy Football Friday on KTAL News Now, which is something that I'm trying to do a little bit before the fantasy season officially goes into full swing and people make their drafts, just to help them a little bit ahead of the draft so they can have a really fun fantasy season ahead and we can get back into some football. But you can catch all of our older episodes on KTAL News on our YouTube. And then you can also find our daily stream of KTAL News Now every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. on KTALnews.com. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and great weekend. I'll see you next week as we'll be recapping the weekend and everything that went on, as well as another edition of Tech Tuesday next week. So be sure to stick around on KTALnews.com, which is where KTAL News Now streams every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. But like I said, I'm Anthony Mocklin. I hope you all have a great day, and thank you for joining us.